Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to Coffee with the Chairman. We have a unique opportunity today to speak with Brian McDaniel, who is the Executive Director of the American Red Cross of the Illinois River Valley, and John Mensching, who is our Acting Director of Kane County's Office of Emergency Management. A little background on this. If you can remember, about a month ago, at the end of March, we had that terrible storm that happened here in Kane County. And my neighborhood in Batavia was really smacked. Trees were down, torrential rain happened. We were without electricity for over 3 hours, popping it on, off again. I was locked out of my house because I forgot my key and couldn't open up the garage door. So one thing led to another, and Brian reaches out to me to introduce himself, and I said, why don't you come over, because we have an opportunity to really get a chance as a community to learn what can happen through the Office of Emergency Management as well as the Red Cross on how we can get supported if we need help during a crisis or an emergency. So that's why I brought them in. So I'm going to introduce Brian right now, who can just tell us a little bit about his background, and then John, if you can share with everybody about what you have done and what brought you to this role. And then we can get started to learn, if a crisis happens, how the Red Cross and Office of Emergency Management can help you, and then all the other wonderful things that they do that are not just crisis management. So, Brian, please.
Well, Madam Chairman, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. And it's really, really a pleasure to be in Kane County and having conversations with the community. I appreciate the warm introduction. I've been the Executive Director here for the Illinois River Valley chapter. My office is in Romeoville, and I've been in this role since 2019. But I've been a Red Cross volunteer going on all the way back to being a teenager. I grew up in the Gulf South, and so dealing with hurricanes and tornadoes and flooding, one of my first early experiences was with the Red Cross. My parents were volunteers, my grandparents, and so just getting introduced to the Red Cross at an early age. And so I volunteered for many, many years. And in 2011, the fourth F5 in my lifetime went through my hometown, and it killed 43 people. And the job that I started that morning was not the job I knew I wanted to have. And so as a result of that, I began to slowly become re-engaged as a volunteer with the Red Cross, began to sort of look at what it would be to be in humanitarian aid. And this position opened itself a few years ago, and I applied for it, and now we're having a great conversation as a result. It's a wonderful organization. We do a tremendous amount of work all over the country, all over the world, and it's just really fantastic to be a part of a movement that puts the person at the center of the conversation.
Thank you, Brian. And John, please.
I came back to Kane County. I started at the ripe old age of 16 as a volunteer in emergency management while I was still in high school, and stayed with emergency management up until I left as a full-time employee doing hazardous materials. And that was the start of my fire service career, where I spent 20 plus years as a firefighter paramedic in the county. And when I retired from that, the position here eventually opened up, and I came back to where I kind of got my start working in this role. So it's almost come full circle, coming back to where you started. So I totally understand, you see it from the beginning and you want to come back to it. So.
And helping people, I think, is something that both of you have very much dear to your heart.
I thought I had this on silent. I apologize.
Totally. That's exactly what it is. Now it's not. I don't see it as much on the individual level that I used to, being on a fire engine and ambulance. But now we have the opportunity of taking care of a lot of people at the same time through our relations, even with the Red Cross now. Yeah.
So we started the conversation with giving my story about the weather. So let's just talk about weather. We've seen cross country that there have been additional tornadoes. We've had crazy weather like today, and we've had heat and we've had cold, and it doesn't seem to follow a pattern anymore. So what would happen if, God forbid, but if we had a large tornado rip through Kane County? How would you both respond? What would be the play and how that happened?
So initially, it falls on our immediate responders, our police, fire, EMS, and with the partnerships that we've built, we come in to back them up with additional resources.
Now, EMS is?
Emergency medical, so your ambulance service at that point, your paramedics, your EMTs, and in a lot of cases, they deal with the typical issues, that you would expect at that point. The problem is that they a lot of times don't have the resources to say, okay, now we've got a whole community impacted. How do we put the community back together to at least initially get them back to maybe not a pre-storm level, but that's the goal long term. But at least immediately, how do we meet those initial humanistic needs? You don't have the whole part of the whole community there. Power might be down. Where do you get basic supplies to survive? Food, water, sanitary issues that you've got going on at that point. So we would be coordinating with our partners, both in our surrounding counties, our other municipalities in the county that aren't impacted. They would send us aid, and then we would be reaching up to the state, and then our what's called our NGOs, our non-governmental organizations, Red Cross, for example. They bring a lot of assets with them when they come in to help, both dealing with individual issues that you might see, like flood cleanup kits after the house is impacted, so they can start cleaning and getting rid of all the problems, to also, if a whole community is impacted, how do we at least put a roof over their head temporarily till they can make arrangements to move to the next phase of rebuilding their life, and what's that medium-term plan look like?
So you and local fire departments and police agencies or the sheriff's office would be the first people to respond. And then how do you get involved? How does the Red Cross get involved with this?
Well, in your example of a tornado, we're going to be watching.
Okay.
We're going to be standing up. If we know we have severe weather, we're going to be on the same conference call that the county is on with the Weather Service. We'll be a part of those conversations so we know what is going on, and then we will begin to prepare our plans accordingly. So let's say we have a large tornado go through, and it goes through, let's say Batavia, and you end up with a large impacted area where homes have been destroyed and are unlivable. Well, EMA and the fire service and the first responders are going to be there immediately, beginning to work on the situation. We will then begin to roll and bring our services to the table. We'll already be in contact with EMA if they haven't already reached out to us, saying, how can we support you? We don't deploy without having that conversation first. And then we will begin to show up. We'll talk and say, okay, has the EMA or the city, have they identified where we want to have a welcoming or a reception center? All right. Then we will come in and begin to formulate the plan on how to run that reception center, providing quick comfort kits, information, food, snacks, things to that regard. If we discover there's a number of people that are now displaced and they don't have any place to go, they don't have friends, they don't have family, then we will begin to have a conversation about setting up a shelter, which the Red Cross would then manage and maintain. But at the same time, we will be bringing in supplies. We'll be bringing in tarps. We'll be bringing in shovels. We'll be bringing in rakes. We'll be bringing in water, food, things that can begin to sustain the community, because where they are in the response, we are in the recovery component of it. And so it's that disaster cycle of prepare, respond, and recover. And that's where we find ourselves, at least in the example you've given.
And one of the things we had talked before this meeting, I thought was wonderful, is that your first effort is to make sure that the first responders are taken care of as well. So could you talk a little bit about that? Because that was new to me. I knew about support for community members, but I didn't know about the wonderful support that you provide for the first responders.
Absolutely. Well, we like the first responders, for those of you who haven't heard the term, are going to be your fire, your EMS, your police departments, your emergency management, your hazardous materials groups, the first people who actually go on the scene. The Red Cross likes to joke that we're the second responders. We're the ones that come in the next wave. And what we do is we realize that when the chief is fighting the fire and we've got the police departments that are out directing traffic and trying to secure the area, no one's thought about lunch. No one's thought about anything to drink. No one's thought about their particular care. And we will then bring that as our first kind of offering. That's the first thing we will do, is we will provide what we call a canteening service. We have a great partnership with the Salvation Army. We are near peers in this arena, and they may have a system that's closer to the event than we do, and they may get on scene first. Okay, you'll take care of the canteening. We'll support you in this other way. We'll bring the hot meals. So we work with our partners. Because as John was saying, with the various NGOs, there are a lot of people that are going to come into a disaster. We're just one of those agencies. But because we respond and we do things in a similar way, we find areas that we're really good at, and somebody else might be really good at filling in another gap. And then when you bring us all together, hopefully we're going to bring a continuity of care that's actually going to be substantial.
So this is a highly structured, highly organized effort. Now, one of the things that I know people, children, seniors, people with disabilities, but what about pets? We've learned from Katrina how horrific it was where pets were left behind or not allowed in. They ended up dogs wandering streets, cats making up cats or cats. Sometimes they have high survival skills, and sometimes not, and they are dearly loved pets. How do you provide for the pets in such a situation?
So doctrine for the Red Cross is evolving in the pet arena. So if you have a service animal that is, has been trained and legitimately as a service animal, they're going to be allowed into our shelters as of, yesterday.
Yes.
Moving forward, I think we're beginning to evolve where we're going to work with other partners in the area affected that may be able, an animal shelter, a veterinarians group, an interested impact organization that can actually do better at that, because we're very good at taking care of people. They're very good at taking care of animals. And so we work together as a result. So I haven't seen the new doctrine. I just learned last week that it is going to evolve, but I don't know where we're going. But as of now, when you get into a situation where we're running a shelter, for the most part, it's going to be the service animals that are legitimately there as service animals.
I think it's also very important, and I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but if your dog or your cat gets loose and it does get captured and appropriately so and put in a shelter, how do you find them? What is the process of identification?
Sure.
So to make sure that they don't get lost and think that they don't have an owner when there is a family who loves them and wants them back because they're part of the family.
The good news is we've got a very good animal control in Kane County, and we work with them on emergency planning just for this.
Wonderful.
One of the areas
That's very good.
we didn't know of, that we didn't even consider up until just recently, is Kane County has a large livestock population. That's a whole nother area
Oh my gosh, yes.
of animal control that we have to look at, and how are we going to address that issue as well in the event of a disaster, because that can overwhelm a small area as well. So, it like you said, it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and everything is evolving over time, and that's what we're learning, is that lessons learned from other disasters now are being applied to our plans internal, and we have to build those relationships through Farm Bureau, through the veterinary associations that deal with large animals, and working with our animal control to ensure that their emergency response is up to where we expect it to be when they write their part of the plan.
Absolutely.
So that we wouldn't have cows like what happened to Des Plaines with that high school prank running through the streets.
Well, we can't fix seniors. I mean, as a parent of a high school senior, I know that we can't fix this.
So to your point. So, all right, so the mitigation happens and communities are stabilized. Let's talk a little bit, that's weather. Let's talk about something that's quite unpleasant, but I think we need to know a little bit more. What happens if God forbid, there is a mass shooting? How do we respond to that here in Kane County? What are the steps for that? Are they very similar?
I'll let you start off.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is you have the same units of government responding.
Okay.
It's still your police, your fire, your emergency management. What we're learning on those incidents is that in most cases, 70% of the time they're over in 5 minutes. The threat is gone at that time. In 90% of the time, it's done in less than 10. So, but now what we're learning through previous incidents is that the recovery from that now can take over 6 to 9 months. And where you're seeing these partnerships build, like with the recovery center that he was talking about, is that now we're putting people in touch with who might not have been directly affected where they were a victim of it, but they were in the area. They have the mental impact of that incident. They're also considered victims of this. And this is a lot of the lessons learned that we're still the information still incoming, like from Highland Park that you had mentioned, as to how do we now support them. We have plans already in place with the health department for providing the immediate mental health care that needs to be. And a lot of that is backstopped by the Red Cross. So our working relationship there is definitely needed. But they try to transition from that emergent, hey, we need to do this, we'll call it a debrief for PTSD meeting initially, into that long-term care. How do you make that happen? And when you start looking at like the federal response to one of those types of incidents, because it's a larger scale, they bring a lot of assets and programs in that now we end up coordinating with getting the people to so that they get the help they need for long-term recovery as well.
Okay. In such an incident, and we can use Highland Park, would the Red Cross come in, especially for our youth, our children, and for everybody? You mentioned that you have to-go bags or comfort bags. Do you provide a little stuffed animal, a blanket, some kind of security, something that you can hold on to, especially if you're a child who just needs comforting?
So those come up a lot when we actually even go on a single family home fire. The fire department will call us and say the family's been displaced and they've got children. We'll come and one of the things that we will have are toys. In the mass casualty event, we will have animals, stuffed animals that we'll provide to children as giving them something to anchor onto at that moment. I think the role that the Red Cross plays in a mass casualty event like Highland Park or any of the other well-known incidents is that we're there in that support role. We're there almost similar to what I described in the tornado. We're helping the first responders first, then we're beginning to actually set up to help the community. And we're still involved in things that are going on in Highland Park. It's been months since that event took place. And we're there for the long term. We provide a tremendous number of support. But in an incident like that, it really ramps up very quickly to be a law enforcement federal response. And so we are one player that the FBI will call upon to do certain things in support of those events. Again, the national, FEMA, the Department of Defense, they look to us as someone who can handle the sheltering, somebody that can handle the large-scale feeding, the mass care components of that. And those are the roles that we play typically in here. But Highland Park brought, and I think that this is unique to talk about from the standpoint in Aurora, with the large Hispanic community that we have in there, is that in Highland Park, many people didn't recognize that this was a very large Spanish-speaking community. And many of the victims, the impact, folks that were affected by this were non-English speakers. And so the Red Cross had to then pivot very quickly and deal with two issues. One was that there was a lot of the community that didn't want to be around all of the law enforcement that descended upon that area for whatever reason. And then another group of people that didn't trust the things that are being in place. Well, the Hispanic community, as we've learned over the course of years, are very, very community-oriented around libraries. And so we set up an area at one of the libraries near Highland Park to where if you were a non-English speaker, and actually we were dealing with Asian languages as well, they could come there in a non-threatened sort of a plain clothes environment.
Correct.
And be able to actually get the same services that they might have gone if they had gone to the official center that was set up. And we didn't do that to counter any work that was being done by our partners. We did it in concert with them with a sensitivity toward the issue. And so we've learned a tremendous amount. As a matter of fact, Aurora University, and I believe Waubonsie has a piece of Kane County as well, We reached out to them because we quickly tapped our ability to speak Spanish with our volunteers. Just the sheer volume of what we were doing, we tapped out. And so we reached out to Aurora, we reached out to Waubonsee, we reached out to Joliet Junior College, we reached out to Northwestern, and we were able to get Spanish speakers into Highland Park within a matter of days to be able to support and bolster that. One of the other things we brought to the table, and I'm very particularly proud of this one because I have a board member who's a graduate student at Kellogg. She immediately activated the network of alumni, and we had mental health practitioners that were living in Arizona that were doing virtual calls with people that were in Highland. So we were able to bring a scale and scope through our network that was substantial and very, we did right, I guess would be the way to look at it.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. It was quite a tragedy for all of us.
Unbelievable.
For all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So you are both of your organizations are volunteer driven. And John, I'll let you talk a little bit. How do you go about recruiting the volunteers, and how many volunteers is Kane County blessed with?
Currently, we've got somewhere in the realm of 30 to 40 volunteers. Some are more active than others. A lot of them are, we've done anything from flyers, posting them around towns, to our biggest drive is social media. And we try to run a new member academy once or twice a year where we bring in the new members and then train them as to what they're going to be going through. In fact, we actually have our very first one for this year. The first meeting is tonight of the new group. So it's kind of exciting to bring we probably got 8 or 9 people that are interested. We only have a couple requirements. You got to be at least 21 and you got to live within 5 miles of Kane County. So if you meet those two, we've got everybody from 21-year-olds to retirees who just come in to work in the office for us to help us on the administrative side. Nice. And whatever time and talents. We were having a discussion earlier today on the broad background. From I can say one of them is a chiropractor, to another one is he's in sales. Another one works in IT for Waubonsee. It's just kind of interesting how we get this. We're a melting pot of all these different worlds that come in, and now they volunteer and provide their expertise to us. One of them is actually a licensed clinician.
Wonderful.
On the mental health side.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he retired from down in the Joliet area.
Okay.
So it's fascinating to find out the backgrounds of everybody that come in. And they're on call just like we are. So they get woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go and assist in any community in the county that we serve. And it could be anything from the simple weather spotting under severe thunderstorm watches or tornado watches to fire scene responses to it could be that large tornado or other type of disaster. Some of our people were out for 24 hours. Back in, I believe it was January when we got hit with that ice storm. Mm-hmm. That was in some ways more challenging than some of the other storms we've been through. Mm-hmm. But that's the kind of thing that they're involved in, and we welcome anybody that would be interested in applying.
And we're very grateful for all of their support. And so, Brian.
Well, ditto. I mean, pretty much everything he said. I mean, really and truly, everything he said is sort of the same way. I think the difference is that you've got an agency that is small and mighty, mm-hmm. and most emergency management departments are, mm-hmm. and having someone who has the expertise who can go and help out at a fair, can go help out with traffic control, can go out and help the things that the EMA is called on to do is vitally important. Mm-hmm. And that's fascinating. It's fantastic that you guys are able to do that. Ours is a similar structure. The scope and scale can be administrative within the office because we need this, that, or the other, or you just want to drive a truck or a forklift. We have those things too. And the way I always talk to the volunteers, because we obviously, and I'm sure you do too, you get a lot of people that raise their hand after something occurs. Mm-hmm. And the message that I usually rely on is that, okay, but now we need to get trained for the next event.
Correct.
And so for me, when we get into the winter months, I always remind people pretty much after Halloween, now's the time to start getting trained to be able to deploy during tornado season in the south or in the wildfires over the summer. or the hurricanes that will come next year. And so you get the training under your belt, you get the experience, you begin to learn the way the Red Cross functions as a volunteer, then you can be prepared. 90% of our workforce are volunteers, and we couldn't do it without them. Sometimes it has to fall to a staff member because we weren't able to locate a volunteer, but just as your team is taking shifts 24 hours a day to be able to support, so are our volunteers. They're taking their counterparts to be able to answer the fire call at 2 in the morning. If we're going to St. Charles at 2, then that's what we're going to do.
Isn't it wonderful? So many people think so poorly of what our culture has turned into, what our communities have turned into, but this highlights the fact that it's just the opposite, that there are hundreds of caring people who are willing to take their time, talent, and treasure to contribute back and to give back to their communities, to put themselves in harm's way so that others can be saved, others can be protected. And I think it's amazing. So we talked about emergencies. So tell us about all the good stuff. I know we have a blood drive. We have other things that happen.
Well, I would love to learn what the county EMA is doing in these kind of arenas. Just very quickly, the American Red Cross collects 40% of the nation's blood. And it's not a Coke Pepsi thing where it's us and somebody else, it's us and everyone else. But it's a collegial atmosphere. If you're giving blood, it doesn't really matter who you're actually going to that drive that day. You're giving blood and you're bolstering the American people, and you're helping folks that need that whole blood after a car accident. We run drives all over the state, all over the country. We do repetitive things, and we can provide you with a list, and hopefully we can have a conversation about perhaps running one where folks can centrally come here to the county complex at some point in the future.
I will be giving blood.
Yeah. But we also do platelet collection, which is vitally important for cancer therapies. And my office in Romeoville has been collecting. The Chicago office collects. Bloomington, Peoria, they collect platelets as well as whole blood. And we do that because your cancer therapies, platelets are a major need during open heart surgery, infant surgeries and such, that's a major need. And you give a pint of blood, you can turn that into about 7 different products. But platelets are so unique, they only have a shelf life of 5 days, and where a whole unit of blood, about a month. And so we want to make sure that we're constantly collecting and doing that. That's some of the things. We also teach the CPR classes. We teach first aid. We teach how to use the automatic emergency defibrillators, the AEDs that you see in buildings and schools and public places all over. We do that because it's the part of the preparedness portion of the cycle. He's the response, I'm the recovery, you're the preparedness. And we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to do those things, and we provide classes and education to children. We do a lot of things. We want to make sure that when we are in a blue sky environment, meaning the sun is out, things are good, we're not having to do anything, that we're getting prepared in the event that the sky turns gray.
And knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
So what about our organization?
We do a lot of the same preparedness training. We have somebody on staff who actually does a lot of the education for anywhere down, to elementary school level, up through adults. We're trying to expand that into the business community. We know that
Wonderful.
Studies have shown that when you have that federally declared disaster, within the next 5 years, 50% of those businesses are not going to be there.
Right.
Well, that's detrimental to your community's economy when you start losing that kind of those kind of businesses. Jobs are gone, tax base is gone. And that's our lifeblood to continue as a community. And you kind of saw that after Katrina with New Orleans. They had to get open immediately for Mardi Gras because they knew that was that was the only thing that was going to fund the recovery for the rest of the town.
And we're 15 years into Katrina, and honestly, New Orleans still hasn't recovered.
Yeah, we're still hearing about the problems.
It is still there.
Yeah,
it's still there.
It's a major thing. It's one of the things that the state is tasked with us for recovery is we're supposed to have a recovery committee, and that's something that we're looking at trying to get up because, it's great from the response side. You immediately take care of everybody's issues that stabilize the problem and prevent it from getting worse. but how do we get you back to some resemblance
How do we get
of
Main Street
normal?
back in operation?
Yeah, because we're all reliant on that. So preparedness for us is really important. We've also been involved in a couple charity events. You know, we do a lot of help with motorcycle rallies, helping them be successful. Maddie's Mittens is a coat drive that we've been involved with, trying to collect winter stuff that way through the volunteer group. They take a lot of the lead on working with these different entities. And then, you know, any other community event that we're just there to support, whether it is that traffic control, command post operations, that they have a successful event and that.
Well, I want to thank you both. This has been, I think, helpful for all of us to know not only how you keep us safe, but how you also prepare us for not just future disasters, but to make sure that we know how to respond, so that we know in case we need a helping hand, that you're there not only to help with our pets, which I was happy to hear about, but with our children, because sometimes children, when a parent is just anxious, sometimes a child can speak wisdom to us and say, this is what you need to do, because they have clear minds. They've been instructed on what to do and how to manage themselves, and it gives them greater confidence in what to do, and also about the blood drive, coat drives, etc. So this has been wonderful, and I want to thank you both for giving up your time and your day to share with Kane County on what you do and how you support us.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for the
So
invitation.
thank you, Brian.
Yeah, it was
Thank you,
great.
John.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a good afternoon. Bye.